Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Fantasy Birds. Today, we are back with some fantasy basketball. We're going over 5 breakout players in the 2022-23 season. Last week, we did 5 sleepers this upcoming year in points leagues. This year, we're going to do 5 breakout players. Let me know in the comments what you want to see fantasy basketball-wise, but let's hop right into our 5 breakout players for 2022. The first breakout player on today's episode is going to be Tyrese Haliburton, the point guard for the Indiana Pacers. Last season gets traded mid-year to the Pacers from the Sacramento Kings, where he was kind of limited due to that secondary ball handler role to De'Aaron Fox, great player in Sacramento. But Haliburton couldn't reach that full potential until getting traded to Indiana, so his season numbers are going to reflect that position that he had back with the Kings. But his full season numbers ended up being around 15 points, 4 rebounds, and nearly 8 assists, which is a great number for Haliburton. His numbers defensively are pretty solid as well. Nearly 2 steals per game and half a block, so getting it done at the point guard position defensively, which we love to see in category leagues. But in points league, he should be much improved this season as well. We said he was averaging 15 points for the entire season, but once traded to Indiana, he was averaging nearly 18 points a game with 9 assists. And if we look even further into these numbers, once Brogdon sat out the last 7-10 games of the year, Haliburton was actually able to average 20 points and 10 assists. And we know Brogdon's not going to be a part of this Pacers team. Dealt to the Boston Celtics in a surprising move, not the fact that he got traded, but how cheap the Celtics were able to get Brogdon on their team. I mean, a great point guard player for not much in return. I mean, great trade for the Celtics, but this is going to pave the way for Tyrese Haliburton to make that breakout season for this Pacers team. We saw it last year, like we talked about, 2010, and still getting those rebounds when Brogdon was not on the floor with Haliburton. So he's got to become that alpha point guard on this team. The team that doesn't have much playmakers on it, Buddy Hield's still there. But this team's looking to rebuild. Probably some pieces still going to be moved out of Indiana as the season goes on. But Haliburton's going to be that main player they're going to focus on building around. In love with Haliburton's ADP at the beginning of the offseason, but he's slowly creeping up to the top 20 players. In a category league, I'm fine with that just because how well he does rebounding and getting steals. Nearly 2 steals a game, which we could see improve with his minutes on the rise. But for a guy who could average nearly 45 fantasy points a game in a points league, Haliburton's a guy I want to keep my eye on as long as he's not creeping up into that top 20 overall players. He should be averaging nearly 20 points and right around 10 assists and grabbing at least 5 rebounds this season. So definitely a guy we think could have a huge year in Indiana, given the fact that he's going to be the only playmaker on this team, pushing the offense and facilitating for his teammates. Haliburton, definitely a guy we want to be keeping our eye on, as long as his ADP doesn't get well out of hand coming into our draft season. Our second breakout candidate is going to be another young point guard, this time Cade Cunningham for the Detroit Pistons. Comes in his rookie season, has a very, very solid rookie campaign, doesn't get Rookie of the Year, which could lead to maybe having a chip on his shoulder coming into the season. But regardless of the awards, Cunningham, a great rookie season, 17 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. So he's capable of putting up numbers in each and every statistic. Nearly 2 combined steal block on a per game basis, a little over 1 steal a game. As his minutes continue to climb in Detroit, Cunningham's numbers should continue to rise as well. And that's what we want to see from our young point guards in this league. You want to see their numbers slowly increasing as the rookie season develops. And that's exactly what Cunningham did, getting more familiar with his offense and getting his body more NBA ready. Cunningham was definitely able to improve on what he did at the beginning of the season, towards the end of the season, where he was putting up over 20 points a game. And we think he can do that for an entire season this upcoming year. Only 17 points a game last season, like we talked about. But ESPN's projecting Cunningham to be over 23 points per game. We're not worried about Jaden Ivey, the point guard they drafted in the first round out of Purdue. Ivey more of a slashing point guard. Cunningham definitely has that in his game, but much more proficient shooter than Ivey. So we think these guys are going to be able to complement each other and not really take away from each other. So I'm not worried about them grabbing a point guard in the first round. And they also signed Jalen Green in a trade with the Charlotte Hornets. Green, a very, very athletic center. They could look to play a pivotal role in the pick and roll game with Cunningham. So Detroit definitely has a young nucleus they're going to want to put out there for extended minutes each and every night. And we think that's going to aid Cunningham being a breakout player in fantasy basketball this upcoming year. Like Haliburton, doing it in a lot of different categories, over a steal per game, nearly 1 block a game, and getting 2 3-pointers per contest. So we definitely think Cunningham has value in category leagues, especially with those rebound and assist numbers to go along with his 23 points a night that we are projecting for him this season. So Cunningham, definitely a second-year guy we have to keep an eye on. Cunningham's one of these new age point guards that we're seeing the NBA trend towards, like a LaMelo Ball, taller, bigger point guards, not necessarily like the Chris Paul old type facilitating, but a 6'6", 220-pound point guard who can shoot, dribble, and get to the rack. I love taking Cunningham for his explosive ability and what he can do this upcoming year in Detroit. Our next breakout candidate is going to be another young guard, but this time for the Houston Rockets, Jalen Green. Also want to be looking at Kevin Porter Jr. Didn't put him on the list, but definitely a guy I like taking. Jalen Green, not really a categories player, definitely more of a points league guy as he's not getting rebounds, assists, or steals. Definitely a points guy here with Jalen Green. With his minutes ticking up as the season progressed, definitely this upcoming year going to see more minutes. 32 a game last year. This year he could get up to 35 points a game with the limited depth they have on that Rockets team. Averaging right around 17 points a game last season, throwing in 3 assists and nearly 4 rebounds, so nothing spectacular on that end. But we want to be hitting Jalen Green for his scoring. This is a guy who can put the ball in the bucket behind the arc at the rim. Very explosive player. The efficiency numbers aren't great for Jalen Green, so if you're a very high volume shooter and not very efficient, but in standard points leagues where you're not getting knocked for missed field goal attempts, definitely Jalen Green can get his scoring up to 25 points a night this upcoming year, potentially. Projected at around 23 points a game, just like Cade Cunningham. But last season, only 17. If he can get up to 25 a night, this Jalen Green's going to turn significant value from your drafts. Green also has the ability from behind the arc, putting in nearly 4 3-pointers a game projected this upcoming year. So if he's able to be that efficient from three-point land and getting his scoring up to around 23 to 24 points a game, Green is somebody in points leagues that we have to be looking at. In category leagues, like we talked about, definitely not somebody I want to be looking at, considering the fact that his defensive statistics and those rebounds and assists are nothing to be proud of. An offense that loses Christian Wood, probably its best player from a year ago, in a team that looks to be very defensive inadequate this upcoming year, Alperen Şengün, Jalen Green, Eric Gordon, and Kevin Porter Jr. Not the best defenders. This team's going to look to run up the pace of the ball, going to give up nearly 115 points a night, but they're going to be scoring at will with these young players, trying to get them reps on the offensive end. So definitely want to be looking at Jalen Green in your drafts in a points league, given the fact that he could have an explosive 2022 campaign. Our next candidate's going to be Evan Mobley, the big man for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Finally getting a big man on this list, but the second-year player out of USC, Mobley's shown he's already one of the best defensive big men in the league. So in the category leagues, we love taking him, given the fact that he's going to put up nearly 2 blocks a game and getting the steals mixed in. But last season, the main reason we think Mobley could have a breakout year is the fact that the pace of play in Cleveland should be a lot higher this upcoming year. Last year, Darius Garland, a great player in fantasy, nearly a double-digit assist guy for this Cavs team. Here, wanted to slow down the pace of play, rely on their great defense with Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, one of the best defensive front courts in the NBA. They're relying on that and having Garland facilitate in the half court. So this upcoming year, they should look to increase their pace of play, given the fact that they get Donovan Mitchell in town with the trade with the Utah Jazz. So with Garland, Donovan Mitchell, and Evan Mobley, and even Caris LeVert, this team should look to score a lot more points this season, get that offense moving in transition, leading to more opportunities on the scoring end for Mobley, and even on the defensive end, as teams are going to have to keep up with this Cavs team. You're not going to see a lot of scoring under 100 points like we did last year in Cleveland. So with the pace of play increasing with Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Caris LeVert, definitely Evan Mobley could see an uptick in his numbers with more opportunities on both ends of the court. Mobley almost won Rookie of the Year last year with a 15-9 stat sheet. This year, he could closer to 20 points and 10 rebounds. And like we talked about, the numbers could get even better given the fact that there's going to be more opportunities with a much faster-paced team with Donovan Mitchell aiding some of the pressure off of Garland's shoulders to create everything for this offense. Mobley and this Cavs team, someone I want to be investing in. Not in the backcourt necessarily, as Garland and Mitchell are going to be taking away that fantasy upside from each other. The big man in Cleveland should be okay feeding off this upgraded play in the backcourt. The last guy on our list is going to be Devin Vassell for the San Antonio Spurs. Before we get into him, I want to talk about some guys that almost made this list. Guys like Jalen Brunson of the Knicks, but we put on our sleepers video, so I didn't want to touch up on him again. But he could have a serious breakout year for those Knicks, given the fact that he's going to be the main ball handler for that team, take away some of that pressure from Julius Randle and RJ Barrett, facilitating that offense that desperately needs a point guard in the half court. Also, Keldon Johnson, we talked about last week in the sleeper video, does have that shoulder injury, but he should be good to go this year for that Spurs team, who look to be desperate for some playmakers and some scoring in that offense. Let's get back to Devin Vassell for the Spurs team. Definitely a late round guy in Vassell, given his numbers aren't jumping off the page spectacular at all. But with DeJounte Murray leaving town, we have to be looking at some volume opportunities for this Spurs team. We talked about Keldon Johnson getting that opportunity at the forward position, but at the guard position, someone needs to be step up. No more Lonnie Walker for this unit. Vassell, a guy averaging 12, 4 rebounds, and just a couple of assists, which should look a lot better this year in Popovich's offense. Only around 26, 27 minutes last season. If he gets those numbers up to around 35 minutes, like ESPN is projecting for Vassell, his numbers could go for 17 points, 4 assists, and maybe 6 or 7 rebounds. A good rebounding guard, very surprising for Vassell, but he's shown he does have that capability in his game. If you're looking for a cheap points league player that can provide some scoring and a little bit of assists and rebounds, just giving off the minutes he's going to have in San Antonio, definitely a cheap option later in drafts that we want to be targeting to get on our rosters. Not paying any significant price for Vassell, but he could have a breakout season with that opportunity that Popovich is going to give him in this Spurs offense. Popovich has already said this team is going to be bad. They're going to be using a lot of players and giving guys a lot of minutes to see what they can do for the future of this team. Vassell's going to be one of those guys. With no more Derek White and DeJounte Murray, he could have a breakout season and look to put up some big numbers in San Antonio. That's going to wrap it up for our breakout players. We talked about a lot of point guards, young point guards, Tyrese Haliburton, Cade Cunningham, and a scoring wing in Jalen Green. We moved in with a big man, second-year player, Evan Mobley, who is being held back by Jared Allen in Cleveland. But if he can see some time with Jared Allen off the floor, that's definitely going to provide even more value for this Cavs team. And then we finish that up with Devin Vassell, who's strictly a volume play at the end of drafts with the minutes upticking in San Antonio. Late in your drafts, you want to be focusing in on guys that are going to get heavy minutes, that don't have the production in past seasons, that could look to add some this upcoming year, given their role changing in their offenses. But those are the 5 breakout candidates we want to be looking at in our drafts this upcoming season. Comment if you want to see more fantasy basketball videos, any ideas you have. But we thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next week with another episode of the Fantasy Birds.